Ever wondered if your DNA holds the keys to your future health? Well, in this deep dive interview, I talk with Dr. Brandon Colby, the founder and CEO of sequencing.com, which is a whole genome sequencing company. And we are discussing how whole genome sequencing is revolutionizing medicine and what it means for anyone concerned about Alzheimer's, longevity, and personalized health. I want to start by apologizing for the recording quality. I am still figuring out how to best record these discussions. So you will see black boxes on the screen to protect the privacy of our Phoenix members. If you would like to join us for future Q&As with experts covering topics like ApoE4, brain health, fighting against Alzheimer's risk, join us inside the Phoenix community. The link to apply is in the description of this video. Enjoy the discussion.
My name is Brandon Colby. I am the founder and CEO of sequencing.com. My interest in genetics really started from birth. I was born with a genetic disease called epidermolysis bullosa simplex, a very rare disease that due to a mutation in my DNA in one of my keratin genes, my skin is very temperature sensitive. On a warm day, if I walk around just a few blocks, I'll have blisters all over the bottom of my feet. That meant as a child, I was always sitting on the sidelines. I couldn't run around, play sports like the other children. And of course, that led to me asking my parents why I'm different from everyone else. And the answer was always, it's because of a change in your genes. So I knew from my earliest perception of the world that I am who I am because of my genes, but also I wasn't very happy with this path that my genes had put me on. I've always wanted to find some way to understand my genes, but more importantly, overcome that path. And that really led me on my career journey. I became a physician at Mount Sinai in New York City. And at that time, I saw there was a tremendous amount of research that was occurring in terms of the genetic association with genes and disease, but it was really not translating over from that research bench into patient's bedside. It was like no one was really utilizing all of that research. And what I really wanted to do was find ways to change the world. And that was only going to be possible through entrepreneurship, through technology. I went to Stanford, I earned my MBA, and I've been involved in the personal genomics industry since then, how to bring genetic information into the hands of the everyday person, and how, more importantly, to make that information actionable and useful to them throughout life. And that's why I founded sequencing.com, which focuses on providing that new type of technology, whole gene sequencing, where you just have one genetic test, you get all genetic information, and then you can go and utilize that information throughout the rest of your life. And we'll be talking a lot about that today, especially as it relates to ApoE.
Cool, amazing. Thank you for the introduction. I think it's very inspiring. I guess if I can start with a more general question that I see a lot of members having, it's how do you pick gene sequencer? Because there are so many out there, and especially when you already have done a 23andMe, what is the added value of doing the whole genome sequencing versus just a few snippets?
I think that people who have had 23andMe, you've seen different chip versions. So you've seen 23andMe, they had version 3 was when they really got popular. Then there's version 4, version 5. Those are all different DNA microarrays, or their chips, the DNA chips that the tests run on. Ancestry has its own version of chips, and they've also gone through different iterations of that. MyHeritage has different versions. Then there's family DNA. There are a lot of different versions of chips out there. I've worked on chips in the past. They're really good because they get small amount of information, but in over a wide range, over a whole genome. They'll get a little bit of information in gene 1, a little bit of information in gene 2. And that's good back in the past when genetic sequencing was so expensive. And it allowed for things like pharmaceutical research to pick up signals that may apply to reactions to different medications. It's good for genealogy. It's good for some wellness purposes, but it misses most of the person's whole genome. It only obtains data, usually the high density, the chips that get a lot of data, they only get data on about 0.1% of the person's DNA. So that's the chips that get a lot of data. it's still missing the vast majority, missing more than 99% of a person's DNA. And that's why different versions of chips, all these different companies have or use different chips, is because there's just so many ways to slice and look at the genome when you're only looking at 0.1%. Whole genome sequencing is very disruptive to that model because it says, we don't care whether the information is important or not. We don't care if we want to look at this gene today or not. Just get everything. Get everything that's possible from the beginning of the genome to the end. And then you have that data set. So it's this massive data set. And just comparison for size, 23andMe and the other companies, when they use the DNA chips, their data size, when you get the raw data file, I know a lot of people in this community, they like that access of that raw data. When you get that file, it's about 15 megabytes, 15 to 20 megabytes, a pretty small file. It's manageable. You could open it as a text file. When whole genome sequencing, when you have your genome sequence, you get about 60 gigabytes, 60 gigabytes of data, like massive data. It's more data than any other industry, than any other type of technology will obtain about a single person. So it's massive data that's obtained. And from that point forward, it's all about the analysis. You need different versions of whole genome sequencing. There's not going to be a company that offers whole genome sequencing like company A, and then maybe a doctor will offer whole genome sequencing, and it's going to be vastly different. It's pretty much the same because it's just sequencing your whole genome. And we could definitely get into the specifics of whole genome sequencing if you like, but it's obtains the whole data set, and then it's very different because it's all about the analysis of that throughout life. Maybe you're not analyzing all of it today, but tomorrow there's something new that's discovered. There's a new gene that's discovered. You have that gene data already. It's just about setting up the analysis for that in the existing data set. So you don't have to go through another kit. You don't have to go through more lab work. You don't have to wait for that data to be delivered. It's already there. It's just really unlocking the secrets that already exist within that whole genome sequencing data. So that's why I see that as very disruptive to the laboratory model. Genetic testing laboratories, as you can imagine, they're really set up to process as many tests as they can. That's how they make money. They charge a lot of money for the testing. Some genetic testing lab will charge thousands of dollars, like $1,000, $2,000 for one or two genes. For whole genome sequencing, you're able and get 30,000 genes, the data on 30,000 genes, all the data in between genes. For now, we're doing this for less than $400. There's still some labs that are doing whole genome sequencing in the thousands of dollars, but compared to just one or two genes for thousands of dollars, it's incredibly disruptive to the existing laboratory model.
Interesting. So just to get an idea of the order of magnitude, how much of our genome do we completely understand, and we studied all these genes, and how much of it do we keep understanding every year?
Yeah, the exome. So the exome is the coding region of the genome is about 1%. So 1% is fairly well understood, but more and more research is coming out that there's importance within that non-code region, either in the non-coding regions of genes like introns, or also the parts between genes. I was in school, they would call it junk DNA. Now it's called gene deserts, but what we call junk DNA, we were taught that does nothing. But now we know it really is important. It's just we had no concept of what it did back then. We thought that it did nothing. We're seeing signals within these gene deserts where we don't know what it does right now, but we're seeing signals that are coming out in research papers that there's importance for risk of different diseases. For cardiovascular disease, there's signals within gene deserts that are very clear, very replicated, multiple research studies, multiple GWAS studies. We don't really know what it does. We think maybe it impacts how the DNA folds, how transcription and translation are occurring, but we're just not sure at the moment. That's why having this whole data set is really important. So you don't have to say, okay, I'm going to look at the region that we know today, but then next week there's all this new research comes out and, oh, we didn't get that on that region. Now we have to perform another genetic test, and now another genetic test. Whole genome sequencing is affordable enough that we can get out of that type of pattern of needing to have more genetic tests and just get it all. And the accuracy is so high now that the data that you get is really high quality, and it makes it worthwhile. It's just so much more cost effective.
Makes sense. It was my understanding that it's worth like doing once, you get the data, and then you analyze it later. Would you say that it's worth to look at every month, every 6 months, every year, every decade? Like how fast does the science start discovering all these like different pieces?
And what we found that it is best really every month. That's what is most digestible. There are hundreds of papers that come out sometimes every week. Sometimes when we look at it on a monthly basis, it's usually within the thousands of new articles that are published throughout the world. There are research studies that are being done by academic organizations that are publishing those studies. And it's just a massive amount of data that went out on a weekly basis. So we offer updates on a weekly basis. Those are really for professionals, for people that are really staying on top of what those updates are. Or for a monthly basis, that's what we find most people. The amount of updates are digestible. Usually, even though we're scanning through thousands and thousands of different updates, usually the number that a person has that actually applies to their genome is in a manageable amount when it's like monthly. And then you're getting sometimes 1, 2, 3 important updates a month, sometimes months where there's no update that's relevant to you. What we do, we just look at all the research that's being published. We look at your genome, and then we tell you what is important. Is this research important or not? Does it apply to your genome specifically? And when we do that, we find usually a monthly basis is best. Traditionally, that has not been automated. It's been a pretty manual process for other laboratories. And because of that, it's usually done either on a yearly basis or only when a person goes for a follow-up to a doctor. The doctor may then ask the lab, there are labs like GeneDx and other labs that will then go and look at maybe a VUS, a variant of unknown significance, where they know what it was before and say, okay, that was a year and a half ago. Let's see if now there's more information about that. But that usually is a manually triggered process. It's pretty laborious, the work that goes into that. When you start to automate it, that the benefits are really on a monthly basis. That's what we have found.
Very cool. I think you touched upon a point that is interesting, which is you see a lot of patients going onto this journey with their doctor, right? And then you have another subset of population who are using ChatGPT or using a lot of different tools to try to derive insights out of it. What would be your recommendation? Because so far, doctors usually they're not like that much up to date with everything, and they don't know all the diseases that are there and so on, right? So what's your opinion there?
So some people, I think, are very fortunate. Their doctor is up to date on the latest technology, is very open to testing things like genetics, is very open to things that are outside of their wheelhouse. Because in medical school, when I was training in medical school, we had about 3 weeks of genetics, 3 weeks out of 4 years. And that was in the first 2 years. So it wasn't even the final 2 years when you're seeing patients. So most physicians that are in practice today just lack a deep understanding of genetics. There are many that are very open about it, that are open to new technology. But then there's also some that are just, especially in the US, that are repressed due to the third-party payer system, where they have to see 50, 60, sometimes 70 patients in a day and keep their practice afloat. That for a lot of, when you start to get into that mindset, you can't really go and have anything that goes in and takes you out of the operational efficiency of your practice. You need to go in and see a patient, very set time that you could spend. You can't go and do outside research and you spend a lot looking at new information, new technology. And when that occurs, which unfortunately a lot of us are experiencing in the US, then we're seeing that there's this democratization of healthcare where people are taking back that power. They're starting to do research themselves. Tools like ChatGPT, other AI LLMs are really amazing for a person to get that power back and to start really digging into things of interest to them, either unexplained symptoms, different symptoms that they may feel gaslit about or that the medical establishment is just not helping with. ways to understand information that used to be really complex, and you would need an expert to sit down with, and you'd have to spend time asking questions. That expert usually doesn't have that time available. It would be pretty rare. Now you could do that 24/7, and ChatGPT just doesn't get annoyed with you. You could ask any questions in any types of way to find out the information you need. The one caveat is it's still very much young, the science of AI, and we are finding that it does make mistakes. And that's one of the things that's important to keep in mind, because it usually presents information in a very factual way. This is what it is. And there'll be times when our whole team, we use it every day. It's of a tremendous efficiency gain, but we're also aware, question it. And there've been many times when it's told me something and I would say, I don't think that's right. And then it would say, oh, you're correct. That's actually wrong. I'm sorry. Understanding the limitations is very important when we use this technology, but it's so empowering to people that now you really have an expert in your pocket, on your phone, on your computer that you could go and you could interact with at any time of the day.
I don't know if anyone else has questions. I don't want to take the whole time for myself. I have tons of questions actually, but I also want to open it to the room as well.
Yeah, go ahead. I have a question also. This is Christy. I have a quick question around when I was looking at if I'll search for a condition, it will come back. I just wanted to understand the demarcation of something that's harmless versus like how you come up with the categories as far as the genes go.
Yes, I think you're referring to our specific service, so sequencing.com. We have different ways to look at results. There's Next-Gen Disease Screen, there's Genome Explorer. Next-Gen Disease Screen tries to present the data in a disease-focused manner. So everything is really around diseases. Genome Explorer is all about data. It's like data-centric. Sometimes it's very technical. So for a layperson, there's a lot of information there. And now we have new AI reports that try to provide it in a report format. That's something that we got asked about a lot. People want reports that they could download as PDFs. One of the things that's really complicated about whole genome sequencing is that you get a massive amount of data. So it's 6 gigabytes of raw data. And then we're looking at more than 15,000 conditions and medication reactions. It's just massive data, massive information. How to go and present that in a way that is really digestible and useful for an everyday person, for a healthcare provider. We're providing relevant information, but we're not watering it down too much. But a lot of that, so it's a balance between like simplicity, like using like an iPhone, really simple, but also providing all the background like details, the granular details that sometimes experts need, or citizen scientists, people who like to dig into their data need. And we're definitely still improving this process. We iterate almost on a weekly basis, come out with improvements based on feedback and questions, such as the one that you asked. So we determine harmless. So if, let's say, a variant is analyzed, it's related to a disease, and it comes back as harmless, that variant is harmless to your health. It's not likely to go and impact your health. That is determined by several different points of consideration. So different values feed into the algorithm to determine that it's harmless. One, it may just be the variant itself may have previously been associated with a condition, but then it was found to be benign. So it could be on repeated different research. So the first researcher said, oh, that is related to, let's say, cystic fibrosis, that variant. But then additional research found out it's actually not. That is harmless. That would be called benign. And then even if you have the risk of that variant, even if you have a change in your genes right at that same GPS coordinate, right at that position, it doesn't really matter because the researchers found it's harmless. It does not impact your health. There's also another aspect that goes into it is it may pathogenic, that variant. It may, if you have the risk for that, the risk allele or the change for that variant, it may go and impact your health. But then when we looked at your DNA, there's no change. So it may be that if you did have a change, it would be harmful, but you don't have that change, and then the status would come back as harmless as well. There are different ways to go and arrive at harmless. And the one thing that I do want to convey about this, because I know it's difficult during like this type of chat that we're having to go over all the scenarios to really dig in, is that our customer success team is always happy to help. And that's something that we have tried to do that's very different than other companies. I know myself just from my own experience of calling up support of some of the other genetic testing companies. It can be like hitting your head against a wall. It's not a very enjoyable experience. We try to do things very different. You could call, you could email, you could schedule time to either talk on the phone, to do a screen share, and our customer success team will work with you to uncover any questions that you have, to discuss those, and to explain things more in depth than I'm able to right now on this chat.
Thank you. That helps a lot, because some of the risk alleles I have, and then when I look at the category, it says harmless. And so I would just, yeah, you answered the question. So basically research says it's not impacting, and that's why.
That's right, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
but it may still be in a gene that's known to be associated with the disease. Previous research may have identified it as associated with the disease, but then additional research, and it's really important in genetics, is this replication, that you need additional research, not just one paper, but you need multiple studies to come out that corroborate that it really is associated with disease, that specific variant. And a lot of times it's not. A lot of times you have that first study, oh, this is big news associated with disease, but then additional studies find that it's not. And that's when the updating of the analysis is so important. It's not something that's static, where you get your genome sequence, you get an analysis, and that's it, you're good. But as more and more research comes out, that analysis actually changes. And I mentioned we find changes almost on a monthly basis. People will have changes to their analysis when you start looking at such a large data set, when you start looking at your whole genome and almost every genetic condition that's known.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Brandon. It's Jules. Thank you for your time and for coming to speak to the community. I think one of the challenges, my family's affected by ApoE4. My husband's a 3/4, so that affects our children. I have a degree in genetics and I'm a longevity coach. And I think from experience, one of the biggest challenges is trying to sort, as you eloquently described, what's important from what's just noise. And so from my experience, there seem to be a few genes that are critical. So ApoE, okay, great, know your status. And then there's other things like choline and how you process vitamins. And so my question is there a product in your catalog or how you look at a risk for Alzheimer's that is most relevant for ApoE carriers, ApoE4?
Right, for ApoE, to find out your status, it's really two variants that you would look at, and then you're able to go and determine whether it's ApoE2, 3, or 4. And that is possible either through one of what we call our sequencing apps. So like Genome Explorer, you would have to do that manually. We're working on a solution that will provide that a bit later in this year that will just combine those two variants. So you'll be able to get that information. It will be more facilitated for people. But we do have a whole report marketplace. So we have the concept of you would get your genome sequence. We provide a comprehensive look, as I mentioned, at thousands of different conditions, medication reactions. And then after that, if you want to go and look at your genes in different ways, we have a whole marketplace of reports that are by third-party developers or third-party bioinformatics companies, that are companies that specialize in nutrition or nutrigenomics. They're companies that specialize in different wellness analysis, such as for brain health that looks at ApoE, for sleep optimization. There's some companies that really are amazing, as we all know, in genealogy. And we offer all those different reports. We vet them. So we vet the companies, we vet the reports, and we offer them in our marketplace so that instead of having to download your DNA and then upload your raw data and then upload it to all these different sites, now it's all protected. We are HIPAA compliant, we're secure, and keep that information confidential. We don't work with insurance companies. We don't work with pharmaceutical companies, government agencies, and that enables you then to go and choose. Let's say you want that brain health analysis. You could go, all it is a click of a button. It will analyze your DNA, just a small part that would be related to like your ApoE status, so just 2 of those variants, and then create a report that is tailored around that, what your status is, and then what you can do based on that status. And this allows us to really offer the best of the best. Like, we are really good at whole genome analysis, at that data processing, rare diseases, at trying to present information many different ways to make it accessible. But there are a lot of companies out there that are really amazing at nutrigenomics or genealogy, about brain health. And instead of thinking in a more dogmatic way like that, we know everything and we're the best of the best and we'll only offer what we can think of, the marketplace concept allows us to say, this is a whole like industry, it's a whole community of people that are trying to move genetics forward. We're not the best at nutrition analysis, we're not the best at genealogy analysis, but we can still offer that to our customers. That's where the whole concept of the marketplace comes together. And yes, we have ApoE, like specific, we have a report that is specific for brain health.
And could I just ask just one follow-up question, Brandon? In the marketplace, which of the providers do you know is particularly good at brain health?
Yeah, the one I'm thinking of is Self-Decode. Self-Decode is amazing. We are also about to launch a new report from Seeking Health. So that's Dr. Ben Lynch, who wrote Dirty Genes. He is launching a report in our marketplace as well. That's not going to look specifically as, so Self-Decode has a report that is specific for brain health. The Seeking Health, the one from Dr. Ben Lynch, looks at a lot of the ways the metabolism genes, the COMT, MTHFR, and looks at them all together in terms of how they apply to a person's like detoxification, the different phases of detoxification, which I think is a really interesting and cutting edge report as well.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I'll check those both out. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, this is Jonna. I think maybe next. I am not tech savvy particularly, and as I found out my status through Apollo Health. So I just have the APOE44. I don't have all kinds of other genomic testing at all, except a little bit that was done at MD Anderson after cancer over 10 years ago. And they tested like 30 things. So I don't know any of that stuff about myself. And when I see people on this community, on the Phoenix, chatting about it, or on the APOE44 Facebook groups, it just seems way above my bandwidth of, so I'm like, why would I even want to subject myself to all kinds of information that's probably just going to stress me out? But then there's another part of me that's, if it's knowable, why wouldn't I want to know it? I have a nursing background, so I'm into all this stuff. So if maybe everybody else really understands the whole process, maybe most of these people have already done your testing, but if you could give just a brief little how the process works, like you sign up and you pay this much and you do this, and then what comes out your way. And obviously it sounds, from what I've even read from the group, people have gotten some information, but they were wishing they had gotten more, but it sounds like maybe it rolls out a little bit at a time. So if you could lay it out there, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for your question. I think what that also boils down to is how we can enable the Phoenix community to go and create a analysis that is really most helpful for you and the community, because it's not where what we go and put out is going to be the best for, let's say, people with ApoE44. Those are very specific focus. There's a lot of interesting information that can be provided on a genetic level that a lot of people, it may be too deep for them that are not ApoE44, but it would be relevant. I'm thinking of that there's something called the Christchurch variant that is actually protective, even if you have ApoE44 that's elsewhere in the ApoE gene. I think most people may not even be aware of that, but for the Phoenix community, that would be something of significance to look at on a genetic level. And putting that together in a digestible report or format, I think would be very empowering. So it is really specific for your interest. Just taking a step back, I know you asked in terms of like the workflow of what to go through the experience. So what we offer several different, what we call sequencing kit bundles. And so this is, everyone has whole genome sequencing. Everyone has that full analysis of that 15,000 or more right now of conditions, medication reactions. And you choose the bundle based on things like processing speed. Our standard processing speed is about like 7 to 8 weeks. We have expedited, that process is a bit faster. So that's about 4 to 5 weeks. And we have ultra rapid for people who really want their results as fast as possible from the laboratory. That's about 2 to 3 weeks from when the DNA test kit is at laboratory to when you get your results. And there's also different reports that are included. The reports break down the information in different ways, but still everyone gets that full analysis. So we don't gate the analysis. We don't say that you have to spend more money to get that full analysis. Everyone gets whole genome sequencing, the same quality, same high quality. Everyone gets full analysis. Even that lowest priced bundle that we offer, which is at usually under $400, is at $399 right now, includes everything. It's just, you don't get some of the reports that break down information, let's say, into like metabolic health or neurologic diseases. So there are different ways to break down that, but at high level, you still get all those diseases, metabolic, neurologic, analyzed. And it will still appear in the top level report that everyone gets as well, like an overview report. It's just not as detailed about those specific conditions. You would go and you would choose your kit bundle. Then we send you a DNA collection kit. It's just a swab. So right now it's 2 swabs. You just swab one cheek, you swab the inside of your other cheek. You send that back to a laboratory that we partner with. Sequencing.com is very much a software platform. We're a platform that is there to store your genetic data in a very secure way throughout your life and then provide the ways to analyze that data. We're not a laboratory, but we partner with the best laboratories. That swab is sent back to a laboratory. It's a CLIA laboratory. It's a CLIA certified, CAP accredited clinical laboratory located in Texas. They go and they process your DNA sample, so they'll sequence your data. Then they go and they send us that raw data, the 60 gigabytes that I mentioned before of raw data. All of this is secure. Once that processing is done, your DNA is destroyed. The DNA collection kit is destroyed. The data on their side is destroyed so that you have that only copy of that data that's in your secure sequencing account. And as I mentioned, we don't go and share that with pharmaceutical companies or providers, government agencies. We're a very different approach from, let's say, 23andMe and others, where the consumer was very much the product because you wanted to get that DNA data from that consumer. And then your customers were actually pharmaceutical companies, or you mine that data yourself and then you try to create therapeutics from that. As a doctor myself, I have not believed in that model. I think that the model that really will grow the industry and that is best for both a company and the individual is something where the consumer is our primary customer. So we don't go and sell data to pharmaceutical companies. We don't work in terms of mining that data ourselves. We don't touch that data. Everything is kept confidential. When that data comes in from the laboratory, it's analyzed, and then you are notified that the results are ready. You can download that raw data at any time from your account. You can permanently delete it if you want, and when you delete it, it's truly gone. We don't keep any backups. We don't keep any pieces of your DNA data. I know that was a concern recently with 23andMe that people would delete data, but then there were terms that said that, oh, we may keep a piece of it. When we delete it, it's gone. Or when you choose to go and delete it, it's permanently gone. And so you have full agency of your DNA. You own your DNA. We state that very clearly in our privacy forever policy. You own it. We're there to keep it safe. And then you get the raw data, and you also get the reports that were included within your bundle. And as I mentioned, everyone gets that full analysis, and part of that is a top level report, what we call a summary report of all the highest confidence results that can be downloaded as a PDF, saved, provided to your health provider, uploaded to ChatGPT. It's yours yours to do with what you want, both the data and all the reports.
I don't know anything about ChatGPT. I know what it is, but I've never used it. So I'm reading everybody's talking about, oh, they put it in there and they're here. I'm like, I wouldn't even know where to begin. And do I want to begin? But thank you. Didn't mean to interrupt, but see, then that's a whole nother level of, oh, I can do that. No, not me, because I don't know how to do that. Okay, so keep going if there's more.
Sure. Then we're working with organizations like the Phoenix in terms of right now, is it useful to have that raw data? Then the Phoenix will help guide you in terms of what to look at in that raw data. Like what are the ways of looking at some of the very specific positions of data in order to get more information that's helpful for people who have APOE4 and how to use that information. Ultimately, I always like, as I mentioned, the simplicity, the automation of that. We would work with people like you and the community of Phoenix to create a special report that just automates that. So it's just a touch of a button, and then it's the Phoenix report is generated, and that has all that information there. Right now, there's some manual steps that are involved, but I think ultimately it would be great to go and automate that. So that is just something that is very simplistic for you, and then provides the information that you need to know, and to also to then engage more constructively in the discussions in the Phoenix community, saying, oh yeah, my report showed this or that, as opposed to, oh, I have to look in my raw data, pull that information out of it, and then do another step of analysis, and then I could go and engage further in the discussion. So I'm definitely with you that there's a technical component to it right now, but part of what we do every day, what I'm always focused on, is how to make things more straightforward, more simple, so that this information, this technology is as empowering as possible without all the barriers to go and get that to be useful. It's all about actionability at the end of the day, and if it's not actionable, then it's really of limited value.
Great. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that.
I just want to follow up on that. Definitely interested in building those reports together. We can definitely connect afterwards. Like, I'm guessing it's some type of template that you need, and then you can run those reports afterwards and send it directly to the patients once they decide to run the report. Right?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. It's a lot more straightforward now with AI. It used to take months or sometimes years of work to put together all the different permutations of the outcome of different genetic reports. Now it's sped up. It's a lot faster, a lot more efficient. So yeah, we should definitely connect, Kevin, and discuss that further.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, let's do that. I just want to also bounce in regarding like all these actionable reports that you can run on interventions and so on. Like for you, which ones are the most important ones? So you mentioned nutrition. What does that guide? Is it, for example, for protein absorption and so on? You also mentioned sleep. What are the actions that derive from that?
For the nutrition ones, the report that's most new in that category, we have some that will focus on optimal nutrition plans. So for a specific goal, if a person is looking at like longevity or is looking at weight loss, it will look at what genes are known today to impact those that can have some interplay with your nutrition. So if it's like weight loss, some people may do a lot better based on their genes with something that's, let's say, lower fat diet. So that may be looking at something other than like paleo or keto, which is pretty high fat. Other people may do better on like a plant-based diet. And you're able to go and look at different genes that will help guide you in terms of at least what your body is optimized for. So that's in terms of nutrition. I mentioned one of the newest reports that we have is actually looking at GLP-1s and which GLP-1 is likely to be most effective in helping a person to lose weight. Sometimes people have to try multiple GLP-1s, and that to some extent is based on a person's genetics. That report that's from a company, PGX AI, will go and look at everything that's known today on a genetic level about GLP-1s and then guide a person and say, oh, Ozempic, that is likely not to be the best one for you, but these other three are likely to lead to the goal of weight loss. It could even be tailored to that extent of like specific medications that relate to something that is nutrition nutrition or within the realm of nutrition and weight loss.
And you mentioned like sleep as well. Could you elaborate a little bit more there?
Sleep looks at, it's an innovative report that looks at all the different genetic factors that relate to how a person handles sleep, but also something called the chronotype, whether they're larks or owls, whether they perform really good in the morning or they perform really good later at night. And that goes to guide in terms of when you should be focused on a lot of the mental tasks, the tasks that really take a lot of mental acuity, whether that's better to focus on in the morning or in the evening. And then there are other genes that go and speak to in terms of like sleep optimization, hours of sleep, what is known on a genetic level. As you can imagine, that there's a lot that impacts a person on a genetic level when it comes to sleep. And this one report goes and ties it all together. So you don't have to go and look at piecemeal, like at one gene at a time, and then go and look at another gene. This report will go and look at everything that is really known about sleep optimization, all the different genetics of that, present that to you in just a single report, and with the goal of how you can use your genetics to improve your sleep. And yeah, and that is just another way of going and like slicing and dicing the genome for something that is very specific use case and presenting that in a way. And that report has really nice graphics. It has really nice presentation. It can be downloaded as a PDF as well, presenting that in a way that is digestible to an everyday person.
Cool. That sounds like really good. I think I actually wasn't aware. I was aware of chronotype, but I didn't know how much of the genes would influence it actually, about the environment and your habits and everything had a huge influence. So you mentioned nutrition, sleep, a few medications, anything else like sports or so on, or is that?
Yes, yeah. There, in terms of the categories, there's a health and wellness category. There's a nutrition, a whole category of nutrition, of looking at genetic information in different ways as it relates to nutrition. There's fitness category, things like fitness optimization, but also injury prevention. So genes can be used, or genetic information can be used to indicate if a person is at increased risk of specific types of sports injuries, which is really useful, especially for professional athletes, where an injury could go and cost them seasons or millions of dollars at their career. And so that's in terms of fitness, both optimization and avoidance of injuries or injury prevention. And then there's childhood development. So in terms of learning, some personality traits. So there are reports on like personality, if a person is more likely to be an introvert or extrovert, and they're more likely to be risk-taking. So different traits like that are put together in different reports that make that information actionable, so accessible, actionable, and understandable. And of course, genealogy is a very popular category. Sometimes there are reports that relate genealogy to some health-related factors, but a lot of that is more just looking at your past, of how your ancestors have migrated throughout the past, throughout the world, and then also just all interesting information about your genealogy and ancestry. So that's a very popular category, of course, as well.
Very cool. Heather was asking if there's an extra charge to run these focus reports. I'm guessing yes, with the marketplace.
That's correct. There is, yes, yeah, and that's all of these reports are developed by these third-party companies, and that's how they go and they generate revenue. That revenue then goes and supports them creating more reports. There is an additional charge. Those are not included when you have your genome sequence. Some people don't want any of those reports. Other people, they may want a report now and then that's there for a person, but it is like totally optional, and it does have an additional fee that's associated with that.
So we had unless there are other questions from people here in the room. Yeah, otherwise, I had a few from the members who could not join. So one is about the polygenic risk score analysis. If it's, I'm guessing it's yes. Does sequencing provide this polygenic risk analysis where it's not only looking at each gene specifically, but also the overall picture, and then gives an overall score?
And polygenic risk is the way, or polygenic risk scores. There are still some a few different acronyms that all basically mean like polygenic risk assessment, looking at 2 or more different genes and then combining the risk for that to come up with just a single risk.
Yeah.
We've been using polygenic risk for things like heart disease, and there's skin cancer, heart disease, and several others over like the last 5 or more years. But polygenic risk scores really have started to take off recently in terms of their popularity. Some of them are really good. Some are just really beginning. What they do is they look at usually a bunch of different studies, and they say, okay, these maybe 1,000 different genetic variants are all found in these multiple studies. Each one has small change in a person's relative risk. So each one alone really doesn't do that much, but when you start looking at 1,000 together, that's when you put the small little risk increase or decrease of each one together, and you get something that could be potentially sizable and of significance. And the good thing about that is that there's now open source communities that are developing these polygenic risk. There are about 2 to 3 of them on the internet now. There's one that is really taking off in terms of a lot of scientists that are adding to that. And that's creating something that the polygenic risk scores had not had in the past, which is standardization, which is where there's starting to be agreement that, okay, a polygenic risk score for diabetes, you really need like this set of genetic variants. In the past, it was always just company 1 would choose set A, company 2 would choose set B, and it would go, and the variants, sometimes they would overlap, sometimes they wouldn't. People would get very different results if they used the first company versus the second company. And that led to a lot of people questioning results. What we're seeing with the polygenic risk scores is with this standardization, now there's starting to be more agreement from researchers and scientists in terms of this is really the set that is needed. And now that can be offered in a much more useful way. So we are expanding out our use of that based on this open source information. And those will be coming out. We have a report that will be coming out in about 4 weeks that focuses on cardiometabolic health. That's from the third-party bioinformatics companies we work with. We're launching that in our marketplace, and then there'll be more and more in terms of the polygenic risk score. So it is something that is really powerful. It's just it has taken time to really develop those to where there's standardization and agreement in the medical community, because there is no one like authorization or licensing body that says this is what you have to use for diabetes, this is what you have to use for cardiovascular health or cardiometabolic assessment. But now at least there's this open source, and it's now consolidating to just 1 or 2 open source communities that are doing this. We're starting to see more and more agreement, and then there's going to be consistency and replication that's possible throughout different companies that go and offer that, which benefits everyone, because then there's just less variability, less question, and much more standardization.
Do you feel that standardization is international, or is it mainly US based?
So it is an international effort. It's open source, so anyone can really access that. The different resources will describe, sometimes they're different, like for diabetes, it may have 4 or 5 different sets of polygenic risk markers that are put together from a conglomerate of this set of papers on this was better, this set of papers found this was better. And then as more research comes out, those are updated to say, oh, this model actually is doing better than this one, or maybe this model will have to add another 10,000 variants to that model to improve it. And that is international effort. The genetics has really been international. Some of the key database and resources are from the NIH in the US, but it really is an international effort. And when you start looking at individual papers, you quickly see that it's researchers throughout the world that are moving the genetic science forward so fast. And it's worldwide out. It really has borders when it comes to genetic research. And that is really important because there's different diseases that affect different populations. Sometimes different populations throughout the world are impacted in different ways. So to make sure that there's this type of inclusivity within genetics, you have to make sure that genetic testing, genetic research is really looking at as diverse populations as possible throughout the entire world.
Great. Yeah, we're just on time. Thank you so much, Brandon. It was a really, really good presentation. I actually learned a lot. I don't know if you have any closing remark.
Yeah, just a closing remark is that we stand at a really interesting time and a really empowering time, especially for people with ApoE4. What we saw recently with the CPS1, the child that was born with a CPS1 deficiency that creates really severe buildup of ammonia in the blood. It could lead to early death. That was the child that underwent CRISPR, so gene editing, was cured from that. That was a single point mutation within that person's genome. First step for that person was whole genome sequencing. First whole genome sequence, which I think is going to be the first step really of all these different types of therapeutics, treatments, diagnostics, is going to be whole genome sequencing for everyone. So similar to that person, the baby had whole genome sequencing. They developed a personalized CRISPR technology that was delivered to that person's liver, to the liver cells, corrected that point mutation. A person was able to go and their body was able to go and generate the necessary protein that then avoided that deficiency. That is really relevant for ApoE, which just changing one point mutation will take a person from 4 to 3. Changing 2 would take a person from 4 to 2. So you'd actually be protective in terms of different Alzheimer dementia risk. That is really now possible. This showed that it is possible. There's still, of course, a lot of research, a lot of testing, but I think we're going to start to see within probably the next 3 years, the CRISPR technology being applied to some of the more chronic diseases. We've already seen almost a cure for cystic fibrosis, for sickle cell anemia as well. Those use a bit of a different approach. For the CPS1, that was something that was very similar to ApoE4. So I'm very enthusiastic that there's a lot of things that you could do today for ApoE4, a lot of things that you can do to slow down the buildup of amyloid, to go and try to push back things like dementia, Alzheimer's, sometimes by decades. But down the road, it looks like we should have some therapeutics that will actually go and change that genetic signature. So that is really empowering where we stand today. We're really at the forefront of that. And that's only going to move forward even faster now with AI as a co-pilot that we have in this research development. I think that the community that you're building, Kevin, the Phoenix, is incredibly empowering and at a very pivotal time, because there's a lot we could do to slow it down based on lifestyle modifications, based on information that we can obtain from genetics and just from discussion. But then shortly down that road, I think we're going to have the ability to actually go and modify the genetic makeup to go and change 4 to 3, even 4 to 2.
Yeah, they actually already did it in some mice models, only a very small percentage of some brain cells, like 1 or 2%. But yeah, it's coming. It's like a good time to be alive, I feel like.
Yes. Yeah. So I look forward to participating and helping out the community, hopefully being involved in chats like this going forward.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you. It was nice speaking with everyone.